our story starts on a cold winter day. Or maybe it was spring. I do know I was with my now ex at the time. Maybe I should tell the story of getting inspired to create this channel through his point of view. You know what? This video isn't getting a prologue. We just have to talk about how to make them instead. Here's a few do's and don'ts to writing a prologue.
But rules have exceptions.
First of all, what is a prologue? It is not the beginning of your story. A prologue is what you put before your story to help set the scene, establish the mood, or share information. A prologue can take place in an entirely different time or place than your main story. You can follow entirely different people from your protagonist and have a different narrator than the rest of your story. And it can share vital information that you couldn't fit into your story. But be careful, because again, your prologue is not your story. It's a fun treat to entice and reward your readers. Your story does not need a prologue, which is don't number 1. There will always be readers who skip the prologue. It doesn't matter if it's the single most amazing prologue in the world. Some people just don't read them. And that's fine. That's their prerogative. And if you're writing your book in prologue right, that should be fine. A prologue is a great place to help insert information on your world and characters. But any super important information that's vital to make your story make sense needs to be reiterated in the actual story. If your prologue follows the wizard and how they made your world's magic system, have a chapter later on where one of your characters talks about the wizard and how he made the magic system. It will help center the readers who did read the prologue and help remind them of the rules of your world. And it will answer questions for the readers who didn't read the prologue. Next up, we have... The whole point of a prologue is to give the readers information that won't come up as naturally in the main story. Think Star Wars. Those text chains at the beginning of the movies are prologues. Now, is it important that we know what the Senate is doing in Chapter 2? No, but it adds to the story and helps make the world feel more real to the people who actually stopped the movie. I'm a slow reader to take in that information. But providing information is a fine line. You want to answer questions for your readers, but don't. It's so easy to info dump. You have all these ideas, these rules, this long history established for your story, and only part of it makes it into your story. Remember, when you're adding information, you need to keep it interesting and keep it organic. That's why you might add the prologue about the wizard making the magic system. Because if the magic system is the everyday normal when your story takes place, your characters won't ever sit down and explain it in detail to each other, because they probably all already know this super mundane thing in their world. That's what the prologue is for. That's why it follows the wizard actually making the magic system and not people talking about the wizard. It's a lot more interesting watching a character do something than hear another character talk about it. And if you establish the wizard, then you establish a history for your world, your characters can talk about the history or a more niche trait about the wizard that not everyone will know, as opposed to the magic system that of course everyone knows about. That's super basic knowledge. It's the difference between talking to your friends about how, oh yes, America, the country we live in, is 50 states, versus how the particular state you live in joined the nation. And another way to keep the information interesting is by... You don't have to change perspectives for your prologue, but you can. If your book is written in first-person present tense, the prologue could be in third-person past tense, or it could take place in an entirely different area or time before or after your book takes place, or follow entirely different characters. It actually should do at least something in that vein, because if you're following your main character the day before the story starts, that's when your story starts. The chapter 1, not the prologue. A prologue gives you the freedom to mess around with your story, and you should take advantage of that. But also keep in mind, a A prologue is usually about 1 chapter long, but not necessarily. The prologue to Avatar: The Last Airbender isn't that much longer than the normal show intro, and your prologue can be just a few sentences or paragraphs or a short letter. What you don't want it to be is several chapters. If you can't get all the information you want in your prologue in 1 chapter, you need to reconstruct your book. Because again, people are going to skip your prologues, and it will turn off readers if they have to skip a quarter of your book before they get to chapter 1. You want to get out whatever information you absolutely need to and move on to chapter 1. And you also want to... A prologue can be very different from the rest of your story, and it can be fun for your reader to take full advantage of all the ways you can write a chapter that's completely different from how the rest of your story is written. But you need to remember it's still going in the same book. Your prologue does not need to follow the exact mood of your story, but you want to be careful not to make the transition from prologue to chapter 1 jarring. If the prologue ends all happy bunnies and dancing butterflies, and then chapter 1 starts at the beginning of the bloodiest battle of the war, that will be jarring. Some writers may be able to use that abrupt mood change to make chapter 1 that much more impactful, but it's tricky and it can be a turnoff for readers and not make them want to read the rest of your story. If they feel like they were misled with the prologue, you want to keep in mind what the mood and themes of your story are when writing your prologue, and work to keep the transition from prologue to story as smooth as possible. Because your prologue is not the hook. It's not the thing that will make your readers want to read your story. It's a treat, it's information, and it's supposed to be fun.
So fun.
And that's some do's and don'ts to write your prologue. Does your book need a prologue? No. But you know what? I don't need a cookie, but I ate one before I started filming because I deserve a little treat sometimes. And you and your readers deserve something fun and satisfying and rewarding for you to start your story.